Hi, my name is Kristina Newhouse, and I am the curator at the Carolyn Campagna Clayfield Contemporary Art Museum at Cal State Long Beach. I am also a CSU alum, and I live in San Pedro. I've been aware of Angel's Gate for many years and have admired everything that happens here. I love the fact that it has become a place where young people, children, can get access to the arts in this community.
My name is Abel Alejandre, and I am a contemporary artist. I identify as Chicano, and I am based out of Long Beach. And as far as Angel's Gate is concerned, I went to school in San Pedro, and so I was familiar with the area. I came here, I'm gonna say, maybe like 5-6 years ago for the first time to see an exhibition. But as far as my coming to this space to exhibit was through Kristina Newhouse, who invited me to participate in this exhibition.
My name is Guerra. I am a printmaker, visual artist. I currently work out of Long Beach, California, in Alamitos Beach. My connection to Angel's Gate Cultural Center stems from when I first moved out here and I learned about the sacred location that Angel's Gate is founded on. My initial attraction here was for that reason, and then ultimately, as I got more familiar with the artist studios and the galleries, I then eventually inquired much more about it.
Printmaking specifically is something that I make a strong connection to printmakers of the past, specifically Posada, José María Posada, which was probably one of the first printmakers that I encountered in my art history books and of Mexican art, and I wanted to just have that sort of like that angst, that passion, that strong line and contrast that those works had, and I would try to to emulate them, in some of my earlier work, and eventually finding my own voice. But I make a strong connection to all these printmakers, and I do think that within the contemporary printmaker world, that there is a strong connection going back, and I make that connection, and I think that a lot of other printmakers do, even printmakers who wouldn't consider themselves Chicano, and so I'm very proud of that fact. I like to draw and paint with I like to draw with paint, I should say. So those paintings I do with paint markers, and so it gives me an opportunity to use paint and draw at the same time. And so I get a different texture, that flatness, but also the intimacy of drawing. And it's something that I've developed over the years, and I enjoy doing a lot. And it's part of my more contemporary, up to the minute work. I'm still working in that technique in the studio.
So with printmaking, I predominantly work in relief, and there's something about the process of carving and the repetitive aspect of stamping that has gone deeper into a more spiritual practice for me. The repetitive nature of it really allows me to have a certain tactile involvement in my work that nothing else has really ever exposed me to. And so printmaking has always been a magical process for me, in that there's certain aspects to it that cannot be explained. And I love that mysticism to the overall process. So the correlation that I make with printmaking and my Chicano identity, it really stems to the artists or the Mexican artists that came before, and they used the process of printmaking as a way of activism. Still to this day, if you go to Mexico, much grassroots activists use relief printmaking as a way to wheat paste across the cities, which you kind of lose much of that today here in America. Even in Los Angeles, you don't see much of that anymore. And so there's something about kind of bringing that into the narrative here, especially being a descendant of Mexican culture.
The broadest topic of the exhibition has to do with the term Chicano and the notion of Chicanismo as it's developed in Southern California. What I thought was interesting is when I was asked to do an exhibition, I wanted to do an exhibition in my community that was for my community. And we have in Wilmington and in San Pedro a lot of Latino families. This important exhibition that was at the White Gallery was called Chicano Art, Resistance and Affirmation. Cara also means face in Spanish, and I think that it was kind of a front-facing presentation to California about Latinos and specifically Mexican artists in California. It is the 30th anniversary of Cara. I think that's important. Locally, you're also seeing initiatives related to the protests that happened, the Chicano protests that happened in Los Angeles. This is also an important anniversary for that as well, which had to do with youth protesting the constraints that were being put on them by the authorities. So there are a lot of echoes, as it turns out, between the present moment and that historic moment in Los Angeles.
The subject matter in Raised as Roosters is a topic that I deal with a lot in my work, issues of masculinity, and I think that my work and my subject matter work perfectly for this exhibition. I like to take on the insecurities and the language and the vignettes that happen within manhood, and I just like to take those slivers of man situations, and I thought it would be very appropriate.
Yeah, so my work in Raised as Roosters pertains to much of my own Mexican Chicano identity. A lot of it comes from my own travels and experiences that I've had within those travels. But an important thing about Raised as Roosters is really the title and where that comes from as it pertains to my father, and a life lesson that he once passed down to me as using the rooster as a form of a metaphor to correlate the Mexican identity in America.
Being Chicano or Chicanx it is it's a movement of empowerment, and I as a political statement, I consider myself Chicano, and it is something that for me it holds a lot of meaning, and it doesn't. Not everything that I do is through that lens, but at the same time, a lot of my worldviews are informed through that lens as part of my Chicano aesthetic, part of my Chicano voice. However, as far as being more politically active and being more engaged in the world, you know, in a quest for social justice, for Chicanos and people within our, you know, in the peripherals of our community and our allies within the community, I do think that we need to have more of a bond with those communities, and I'm not sure how we do that, but I do think we need to talk about it, and I try to do that through my work in some cases, and in other cases just having a conversation with people that are not like me, and and see where they're coming from. I don't need to be you. I want to get to know you.
So for me, growing up Chicano, especially in a place like Santa Maria Valley in the 90s, the idea of what a Chicano was in that time had much more connections to gang and street life. And ultimately, I knew at a young age that I don't associate with that sensibility of gang identity, to where much of the community members there really associated the term Chicano to gangbanger. And so for me, it was ultimately a goal to really remove myself from that and really define the term Chicano in my own way. And so what Chicano or what Chicanismo means to me now, it's really an authentic way of expressing yourself and being yourself, but also really tapping into your family heritage and understanding your family heritage, and also understanding your surroundings, your environment, where you come from, where you are today. That plays a big part of my own identity of who I am today. It really has to do, again, with how one perceives their own Chicano identity. And in a culture like Mexican culture, where it's very male dominated and at times very homophobic, being an American and kind of having these two understandings of how gender roles are not the most constructive way we should be living our lives, but ultimately when you come home from school and you kind of see the gender roles really play out, especially in my household where my father worked and my mother stayed at home and she cooked and she did all the domestic work, it really allowed for me to really question what gender roles are. And so as I became much more conscious about this idea and my own connection to La Virgen de Guadalupe and being in a very traditional Catholic family, we relied on La Virgen de Guadalupe for a lot, especially for anything good to come our way. And so that in itself says a lot. The fact that a female deity can be kind of our own savior. And so still to this day, I live my life where La Virgen de Guadalupe is prevalent in my existence.
And with Office Mentor in particular, it deals with those individuals within our men's sphere that every woman has to encounter in the workplace. The men that think that it's their duty or their obligation, if not their personal thrill, to escort and to mentor a new person, a new woman in the office place, in the workplace, and making that individual more uncomfortable than it really needs to be. And everywhere I worked in a lot of corporate situations. I've worked in a lot of different types of environments, and this type of person, I see them everywhere. And so I wanted to encapsulate them in this piece. So I exaggerated and made it over masculine. It's probably the most masculine piece I have. So I had to have this sort of minotaur, and that's where the play on words comes in. The piece Man in the Sky is a sort of an homage piece to a Mexican wrestler called, they went by the name El Santo. and he would be like, for some young boys, like myself when I was a young boy, he was a hero. He was all man, all strong, and he was just like if a superhero was real, as far as we were concerned. And so I thought of the ideal man, our Superman, that when he died, he became like a celestial being, and we can now make up stories and mythology, new mythologies of him. And that's how I see him now in the sky, now in amongst the stars, having epic battles. And in Tale of Two Birds, it's dealing with the violence of the cartels and the violence that's fueled by our unquenchable thirst for drugs here in this country. And so the people that are paying the price are the people of Mexico, the people in these border towns. And so I have this skeleton, this man, this is basically a skeleton in a field of guns, and he's pleading to the heavens for help. And this is a problem, as I see it, caused by this antiquated a proof of supremacy, of greed, and mostly exhibited in us men, I think, and causing a lot of hurt, a lot of pain. So I have this central figure just pleading to the heavens, holding on to some roosters, these flightless birds, for rescue. And I have the telephone lines, them trying to reach the gods, trying to reach a god, trying to reach somebody, and their prayers, their pleas going unanswered. And so it's a very emotional piece for me, just because I don't see a solution.
The motifs in my work stem from the sense of nonverbal communication. And so my fascination comes from the human's exploration of their environment and ultimately using nature as a way to then communicate that to their neighbor. So the motifs that I use in my work reference a lot of Mesoamerican sensibilities, in that there's a lot of fascination with nature and the depiction of a lot of the native food that might have been prevalent in their diet or a big part of their culture. So again, them pulling inspiration from their environment to communicate certain aspects. And so me as a Chicano really pulls from that part of my identity of having native roots on this land, and then ultimately using the same sensibilities where I'm focusing on native flora or native food of my own environment here in California, but also referencing significant motifs that might have been prevalent in Aztec culture. The layered meaning within my work really pertains to the idea of migration. And so migration being significant in the sense that a lot of the motifs that we do have today, or at least the motifs that we understand today, come from this kind of confluence of Spanish and Native Mexican or Native American understanding. So when you have that culmination of generations kind of appropriating different aspects of one another, you kind of get you get a point where it's easy for me to then understand where I come from. And so then to use that same idea of language really allows me to participate in my family heritage or my lineage or the timeline of my family in that sense. So El Camino Real, Las Californias, that piece specifically is associated to where I grew up on the Central Coast in Santa Maria Valley. And so El Camino Real is what we know now as Highway 101 that goes across coastal California, which naturally it was a way for a lot of the native Californians, the Native Americans, to kind of migrate their way across the state. And ultimately the Spanish then came here and utilized that and put the name El Camino Real, and also Las Californias pertaining to where then California gets its name from, right? And so that piece, if you look at it closely, the motifs utilized there are of a strawberry flower. And so strawberries are very significant produce that are grown in Santa Maria Valley, and was the main crop that my family used as a foundation to really establish themselves here in this country. With years and generations of experience in farming and ranching, the operations changed dramatically from Mexico to America, and so my family ultimately got into commercial produce, and that fortune allowed them to settle here, have a family, and kind of lay their roots here. Aztlán is kind of like this sacred place of origin that Chicanos have adopted for themselves. It's said that the Aztecs hail from Aztlán, meaning, or the term Aztec meaning people from Aztlán. And so with the history of Chicanismo, and then they adopting the term or the origin of Aztlán as our own place of origin, Santa Maria is kind of that place for me that serves as Aztlán. That's my motherland. That's the land that cultivated my early teachings, and so ultimately I'm making the comparison of kind of this sacred Aztec land, comparing it to my own sacred roots of where I come from also.
It's interesting always to create juxtapositions between very different works of art, because I mean, this is the way we get through the world on a daily basis anyway. There's never a single visual message anywhere we go and in anything we do. And art should be no different in that regard. We should be able to pair things and have different kinds of conversations and imagine what those conversations are when things that we don't expect are paired with one another. In this particular case, you have Guerra, who is referencing Aztec iconography, obviously through the lens of his experience in the agricultural region of California. But if you've ever been to Mexico, you know that this vocabulary of pattern it infiltrates everything. It's on buildings, it's on churches, it's in the visual materials that you see, it's certainly in the streets. And this is also the case with the more pop cultural references that you have from Abel, like the wrestler with the mask.
What I want my viewers to get from my work is to initiate a conversation, initiate thought, and I want them to think about the subject matter. And they don't necessarily have to have a conversation with me, but I do want to ignite some more, some deeper thinking on the issue of masculinity. It's not one-dimensional. It's like everything else, nothing is as what it seems. And I would like people just to think about it a little bit more thoroughly. And obviously, I think about this a lot, and I have a lot of respect for my viewer, and so I don't like to spoon feed them. So I I try to leave little gifts in there. So the more time you spend with the work, you'll find that there's more in there for you. But if you just want to take a glance, I got something there for you to enjoy as well.
What I would hope is that when people come into this space, that they can find something that they can connect with, that's a part of their daily experience and their interests in the aesthetic, in the environment they live in.
So the most important thing about my work is the spiritual aspect of it. And for the audience, it's important that they do connect to the work on a spiritual level. There's something that happens visually with the repetition of designs and motifs that can allow the audience to really elevate themselves from the moment. And so to experience my work, it does revolve around a sense of isolation and putting yourself there in front and really allowing yourself to transcend, if that makes sense. Because there is something about the power of motifs that the human language cannot decipher.